Okay, so we might get started now. First of all, my name is Aislinn. I am the Content and Brand Manager here at UCDPA. We might go to the next slide there, Yoni, if that's okay. Just to go over some housekeeping. So the webinar is being recorded, and we will share the link with you in an email in the coming days. So please keep an eye on that, and you're more than welcome to share it with any colleagues or anyone that you have. If you've any questions, please do ask them. You can use the Q&A box below, and we have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar as well. Just to go through the agenda on the next slide then. So first of all, I'm just going to take a quick second just to go through who we are at UCDPA. Then I'm going to hand over to Yoni. Yoni is one of our subject matter experts on the course. He's going to talk to you about what full stack is, what you'll learn on the course, an overview of all the modules, the class structure, and then he'll also show you a project that you will be doing on the course. After that, then I'm going to pass you over to Graham, who is one of our education consultants specializing on this course, and he'll talk to you through how to enroll and payment plans for the course, and then we'll have the Q&A session as well at the end. If you have any questions throughout the session, please do ask them at that time in case you forget them, and we'll get to them at the end as well. So I'll get you to go to the next slide, Yoni, please, if that's okay. So just a bit about us here at UCDPA. So we offer career enhancing certifications. All our courses are taught by thought leaders. You'll learn alongside professionals, and we have a wide range of courses beyond just full stack. So if you're interested in having a look, you can pop onto our website. We've flexible payment options, and I suppose the most beneficial thing is that it's really flexible. So if you're working full time, you'll be able to fit your study in as well. Most of our courses are in the evening. Next slide, please, Yoni. So and lastly then, before I hand over to Yoni, just some quick stats. So we also work with some organizations. So we worked with the HSE, Microsoft, Intel, Salesforce to train some of their employees. We have a 90% student satisfaction rate, which is great. And we've over 40,000 people who have trained with us since we began in 2020. So with that, I think I'll pass over to Yoni to get into the meat of the presentation.
Cool. Thank you, Aisling, and hi, everyone. So I'm Yoni. I'm a lecturer on this program, and I'll be talking to you about what you learn on this program and how you learn it, and even, as Aisling mentioned, show you a demo of a project from halfway through the program. Okay. First, I'll start by talking about what this idea of the full stack is. When you think about large web-scale applications, they have a lot of components, and even though they may be more complicated than what you see here, the general structure is pretty much always the same, and we call it the three-tier architecture. And these are the tiers that comprise together how we think about the data flowing through the application. On the left here, you have the actual user's application, and then towards the right, we see how the system has the control of the data flowing from the user's end to the users. And the three tiers are the front end, back end, and database, such that essentially the user here on the left, each is working on their own computer, their own device, and looking at an interface that we created for them. And this is called the front end. That's the first tier, where they have the structure of the application in terms of all of the text, the images, the controls that they're seeing, and that's where they press things, they input information. But that's still only on their device. Then to actually coordinate the activity of the users across themselves and among kind of all the other systems that we want to have and all the data that we control, we have a backend server behind the scenes that is a system that we control that coordinates this. And that's where we have all of our business logic, our rules defining who gets to see what, who gets to change what, and how the information flows. And then even behind that, we typically have a central database, which is where we store the data for the long term, such that our users are able to essentially contribute pieces of data based on their own experience, other sources, each one kind of passing the information in through the backend to the database, and then other people can access that. So these three tiers allow us to separately control the data as it's presented to the users, as it flows through the system, and as it's stored long-term. So that's the idea. That's what we call the stack. And a full stack developer then is a professional, an engineer who is capable of working on all of these components of the stack. And if you want to be a full stack developer, that means that you're going to be actively participating in the creation of these systems, being able to either write all of the different pieces yourselves or kind of do one piece at a time while coordinating with others. Or some of you might go through this program, learn all of these skills, and then decide that you want to specialize in just one of these. So be a dedicated front-end developer or back-end developer or database administrator. But by having experience with all parts of the stack, that will make you a lot more productive and effective at your work because you'll know how to coordinate your activities better with all of the other people on the team, especially when the project is large. So that's the idea. And as you might assume, there's a lot that you need to know to understand all parts of the stack. So that's what we do on this program, right? Our program, our course is a year-long path that will take you gradually through all of those tiers from the left of that diagram through the right in 6 modules. We'll have a first module on web design. We'll just be designing the structure and style of the interface. Then JavaScript, where we'll add interactivity to control how the interface actually changes based on user events. Then we'll start going towards the backend, introducing Python as another language, then introducing the database on the right, then having frameworks to encompass all of this. And then you'll get to do a large final project to really kind of showcase your ability to learn. This was very quick. I know that kind of isn't enough. So what I'm going to do now is gradually take you through each of these paths so you'll know what you learn in each module. So starting from this first one, web design, this, as I mentioned, is where we build the actual interface. To learn how to build interfaces in web applications, you need to control 2 languages. So the first one is HTML, short for Hypertext Markup Language. That's the structural language. That's the language that we use to actually define the content of the page in terms of all of the paragraphs, headings, images, tables, form elements. So everything that people actually see in terms of what's there, that's HTML. And then separately from that, we have CSS, Cascading Style Sheets, as the language that controls the styling of the content. So these are kind of 2 separate concerns. HTML is just the what, and CSS is the how. So that will include things like fonts, sizes of elements, colors, orientation, and mainly layout, just kind of deciding what goes where and how that responds on different screen sizes. Because a big concern for us is to build applications that will look great on desktops, on tablets, on mobile devices. So CSS helps you with that. You learn kind of the intricacies of both languages in this module, but also, given that this is the first module of the whole program, you will learn additional tools that you'll be using throughout. And specifically, you learn about Git. Git is a version control system that helps you essentially create new versions of your code. Every time you're adding a new feature or changing something, you will create a new version in Git. And Git will allow you both to control those versions and roll things back if you accidentally broke something and kind of manage multiple paths of development. And Git will also allow you to then deploy your code, your website, to your users to use in the cloud. So you learn how to do that. And you learn to use an editor called VS Code. So actually, it's an IDE, an integrated development environment. And that's what we will use to manage the actual writing of our code and running it and previewing it to help us be productive. So that's module 1. You learn how to structure each of your pages, to design it, to deploy it. And at the end of this, you'll create your first project where you're going to actually build from scratch a website of a few pages. But at this stage, it's going to be only static, right? People won't be able to actually interact with it. Then that's where module 2 comes in, where you're going to learn about the JavaScript language that allows you to add that interactivity. So JavaScript is going to be the first imperative programming language where, not like in HTML and CSS, where we kind of declare how the structure and styling should be. In JavaScript, we actually are going to give the computer commands of what we want it to do. So we're going to say, okay, if this happens, then do that. Repeat this a few times, and then pass it on to something else. And the way that we're going to connect JavaScript to our pages is with so-called event handlers, right? Where for different activities on our HTML page, you might say, okay, so if the person clicks that button or moves that, then this should happen. And we're going to then make the whole page dynamic, introducing new elements on the page, hiding them, moving them around, and submitting information to other systems and fetching data from other systems. So that's what you learn to do in this module, learning both the JavaScript language and how it integrates with the front end. And you'll also learn the approaches of actually using imperative code to solve problems. So this is where you start learning to be a programmer. Then you'll create your second project, which will be now a dynamic front end, where each user can do very cool stuff on their own computer with their own browser, but each user is still isolated. So after doing this project, you'll head into module 3, where we're going to introduce the backend. On the backend, we typically use a different programming language, and the most popular one, both for this and in general, the most popular general purpose programming language in the world these days is Python. So in module 3, you'll learn about the Python language. You will learn how to use Python on the backend. So you learn about the HTTP protocol, which is the main networking standard that we use to pass information between the front end, the browser, and the backend server. And you learn how to utilize Flask, which is a small framework in Python, a tool that allows us to structure backends where you define essentially a function, a piece of code that will respond to each different type of request that comes from the browser. So that's what you learn here. And at the end of this, you'll build a project that allows you to coordinate the passing of data across multiple front ends, right? With each user essentially able to contribute a bit of data that would influence what other people see. Then with that in place, we are ready to add that final tier, the database, which is where we will manage the long-term storage of data across a single session to however long the web application will need to run. Databases are complex things, and we need yet another language to learn how to work with them, and that's SQL or SQL, short for Structured Query Language. So you learn how to model your data in a way that fits well in a database. You learn how to use SQL to insert data into the database, modify it, and of course, query it to fetch it to be used by the front end and the back end. So you learn that, and then once we're kind of ready with that basics, we'll introduce SQL Alchemy, which is a tool in Python that lets you actually connect the database into your Python application. And specifically, you learn how to integrate it with Flask, that framework, to essentially structure data in a way that fits well to be transferred into the front end. At the end of this, you'll build a database-backed project, and that will essentially have you do a basic version of all of the parts of the stack, right? So at the end of this, you are already a full stack developer, but this is not quite enough because with these tools, it's hard to build something big. And that's where module 5 comes in. In module 5, you learn about larger frameworks, right? So I mentioned that Flask is a framework. It's something that helps you build a backend, but Flask is a micro framework. So it's great for starting out and for doing stuff that's very flexible, but it's not enough to build essentially something big and structured. So that's where Django comes in. Django is the biggest framework used in Python. It is a large very opinionated and very powerful full stack framework that allows you to manage large projects. And with Django in particular, it will help us to organize a web application that has a lot of different components that are used by registered users. So Django will help us create the flow to register users on our application to allow them to create their accounts and choosing a password and storing that securely, to log in, log out, to reset their passwords via email, which you learn about, and then to manage the permissions, the authorization of which user is allowed to do what. So you'll see different ways of doing that. And as an example, one of the projects you'll build is a blog where registered users are allowed to write posts. Unregistered users can only see posts. And in any case, only the creator of a post is allowed to edit it or delete it, whereas other creators can only control theirs. So you learn to do that in Django. And separately, in the second part of the frameworks module, you'll learn about React, which is a more advanced JavaScript front-end framework, where it will give you a different way of structuring the HTML essentially. So whereas in module 2, you learn to use JavaScript to change existing HTML, with React, in this module, you learn how to create the HTML entirely dynamically via JavaScript in a more complex and synchronized way, managing the state of the front-end data in a way that also helps you coordinate that with Django. So that's module 5. And at the end of this, you'll create a kind of fully controlled project that includes all parts of the stack and has the authentication and authorization to essentially control the business logic for something big. So that's the last part where you learn new things. And then because we want you to gain more experience, we have this final project module, the final one, which is a capstone. So now that you know how all of the pieces work and you know how to build a large project, this module will give you more time to build a much bigger project. So you'll have more time, you'll have more support, and you'll have sessions where we help you go through each of the phases of the project development, where you'll kind of gradually plan something bigger, and you'll actually be presenting to your peers your approach, your decision-making, and get their feedback and advice, right, on how to create a better solution. And with that, you'll graduate and get a certificate. So, okay, that was the what. Let's talk a bit more about the how of the learning. So this is a year-long program where throughout the year, you'll be doing these modules, each for 5 to 8 weeks. And in those weeks, you'll have twice weekly sessions in the evenings, where the session includes a lecture and code demonstrations. So sometimes during the lecture or sometimes after the lecture, we'll have a section where we show you more complex example code. And the last hour and a half or hour of each session will be lab work, where we split you up into breakout rooms and give you example tasks to work on to kind of gradually build up your skills. In these breakout rooms, you'll be working independently and sometimes in groups, supporting each other, and get assistance from myself and the other lecturers. So that's for all of the regular weeks. But at the end of each module, as mentioned, you'll be building a large project. And for the projects, you'll get guidance from us during the sessions. You'll get advice on how to approach it, what you need to do, and how that will be assessed. In addition, in the weeks when you don't have a lecture, you have Saturday sessions, which are essentially office hours with another instructor who will be there to give you advice and support as you're working on your own projects. But I'll also have to mention that this does involve a lot of independent work. So both during the sessions and during the work on the projects, you will need to put in a lot of effort, and we'll do our best to support you in our interactions and on a dedicated forum where you'll be able to ask questions and get advice from the lecturers and from each other. So that's the scope. And I would like now to dive into a demo application to show you an example of the sort of project that you would build in this program. And I'll do this by showing you a few phases essentially in the development of a project to help you understand how we build the stack up. So I'm going to show you how we start going from a static page to a dynamic backend controlled application, essentially from halfway into the course. So this is an example project that you might see in the Python module, right, in the third module of the course. And the project is a chat application. So what I'm going to do now is stop the slide deck, apologies, and go into VS Code. Okay, so VS Code, as mentioned, is this editor or IDE, integrated development environment, that helps us work on our code. And what I have here on the left is 4 folders showing different phases in the development of a chat application, starting, of course, with 0, because we typically, as developers, count from 0. I'm going to show you the code, even though I don't expect you to fully understand what's going on, right? This is kind of a sneak peek of the sort of work you'll be doing on the course. So in this very first version, I only have an HTML page. Okay, so this is only the structure of the page. HTML, for those of you who haven't seen it, looks like this. So we have these things called elements, right? So I have an HTML element that comprises the whole page, a head section for general information about the page, and the body section starting here and ending here, which includes the actual content of the page. So you learn about each of these elements, how they work, and how to compose them together to create an application. In this case, I want a very basic chat page. So I want to have a heading. So this is my heading. Welcome to our UCDPA Flask chat example. I'm going to have a section that actually shows the chat messages. So I have a division element here with 3 paragraphs, 1 for each chat message. And then I'm going to have a form where this is the interface, the dynamic part of the interface, where people will be able to input their name and the message they want to send, and then have a button to submit it. So you will learn actually to work and think about code like this. But of course, it doesn't make sense to only look at the code. So we want to be able to run it. And VS Code gives us a very nice way of previewing the code as we work on it. So what I'm going to do now is what we typically do, where we open the editor on one side of the screen and the preview of the page on the other, and work on it, right? So what I have here essentially is that this code is being rendered by the browser here. So this is a very basic structure of the page, right? These are the components that I need to have, where the idea would be that I'm looking at the previous messages, and then I'm going to introduce myself here and write another message, hi there, and press send. And I would hope that this goes in here. So that's the idea. But of course, I haven't implemented that yet, right? At this stage, I only have HTML. HTML is not dynamic. And also, there's no styling here, right? This looks very barren. So it has all the pieces, but it doesn't look good. So before we add the dynamic interactive parts, let's talk about styling, right? I mentioned that we use CSS for that. And in this second example, number 1, I have the next version of this. Okay, so I have here, I'm going to make this a tiny bit wider. Sorry. Okay. Whoop. What I have here is essentially the same HTML page. So I kept the body exactly the same, but I added one line to the HTML in the head section here, which is a link to the CSS file. So I created a new file in the CSS language that I put in the same folder here. And this is where I want to control how things look. This is the structure of CSS, again, that you learn about at the start of the course. In CSS, we choose each of the different elements that we want to style in our HTML. So here is styling the body, styling the header, styling the chat display element, and so forth. And for each, we can declare in CSS how we want it to look. So for example, for the body, I'm going to say that I want it to be displayed as a grid with 3 rows, with the first 2 being small and the middle one taking up most of the space. So that's going to be used for the actual messages. I'm controlling the fonts, I'm controlling the colors, and anything else that I want. And again, you learn kind of to think in CSS, but of course, you will want to preview it. So web development is very kind of visual. So I'll open this for preview. And this is what it looks like after the design. Okay, so we have nice colors, we have a nice rounded border, we have these essentially card elements or pills for each of the message, and we have a form that looks a bit nicer. Again, this is where I would add my messages, but of course it doesn't work yet, right? So we have the structure, we have the styling, and now it's time to add interactivity. Okay, that's what we'll have in the following example. What I have here is, again, pretty much the same HTML page with actually one simplification. So what I did is that I removed those pre-filled messages, right? So now that we're going to have a dynamic way of creating messages, we don't need them anymore. And I added another kind of linking element. So this is a script element that will point to a separate file written in the JavaScript language that will introduce, right, the interactive part of this application. So I'm going to go ahead and preview this. And you'll see it looks the same, right? I haven't changed the styling and I just removed the content. So what we need at this stage is to write the JavaScript code to control what happens when I fill out a message and press the button. The way this works in JavaScript is that we create so-called event handlers. So I'm going to go into JavaScript. Again, I don't expect you to understand what the code kind of does, right? So I'm just going to show you the high-level structure. And this is, again, a sneak peek to the sort of stuff that you'll be writing. So at the top here, what I'm saying is that I want to find that chat form element on the page and add an event listener such that when a user will submit that form, we will call this piece of functionality. So I want to have logic that will handle a new chat message. In JavaScript, what we do is write functions, where each function is a kind of enclosed piece of logic that we can then run to achieve a specific goal. So this is a function that I wrote, and this function will handle the event of submitting that form and essentially process the inputs. So what this has is that it will look at the name input, check if there's nothing there, and if there's nothing there, it will alert the user that they have to fill out their name. So let me just show you what happens there. So let's say I don't have a name and I press send. I have this alert, right, saying you have to first enter your name. So that's some very basic event handling. Assuming that there is a name, I extract the message and I will call a separate function. Again, we kind of split our functionality into functions. This is a function that I called add message, which will be in charge of actually adding that message as a new paragraph on the page. So this is the one defined here. And what we do is that we create a new paragraph element, we populate it, and then we add it to the chat display and scroll it to the bottom if there are too many so that the user can always see the latest message. In addition, just to make the styling more interesting, what I chose to do here is to have the color of the messages of each user be attached to their name, such that each username will have a different color. And when they write a message with their username, we will kind of use the same color every time. There are different ways of doing that, but what I chose to do is use a mathematical function, an approach called a hash, to convert a name to a color value, and I created a function for that. I'm not the biggest mathematician, and I didn't want to do this myself. I know there are people better equipped to do that than me, and this is where the open source community comes in. So the internet is full of examples of people solving common problems, and as developers, we are able to use these sort of open source contributions in our projects, either taking up large tools or sometimes small pieces of code, as long as we follow their license. So I found a great function for this in a site called Stack Overflow, which is a really good kind of site for web developers in general, to share approaches and especially kind of do Q&A. So I found a good solution there. I copied it, slightly adapted it, and I essentially credited them, right? So in my comment here, I said, this is not my code. I'm using someone else's code and incorporating this into my project. And this is very common. So what this does, right, is just take a person's name, do a bit of math, and convert that to a color. And with this functionality in place, I am now able to actually write messages here. So I'm Yoni, I'm going to say hi, and then I'm going to keep myself as Yoni and say, what's up? And maybe I'm going to switch to being someone else. Let's say I'm Nicole, and I'm going to write, hi, Yoni, how are things? Okay, apologies for not being too creative with the messages themselves. So you see here that each time I submit the form, it creates a new chat message, and that the colors are controlled by this. And if I return to myself, it will still kind of go back to the same red color. Great, thanks. Okay, this works, but this is still only on the front end. And I want to demonstrate what happens if I open a new page. Right, so I'm going to open the preview again. So I'm going to HTML, asking for a preview, and I'll pull it into a new window here. Okay, and you'll see that it doesn't know what messages appeared here before. And if I were to write a new message here, there's no synchronization, right? So with this version of the project, it's still front-end only. Each user is in front of their own version of the front end with absolutely no synchronization between them. So this is where the backend comes in. I'll close these and go and show you the final version of this project. So that's version 3 here, where now we're introducing Python. Okay, so Python is the language that we will use behind the scenes on our server to, again, coordinate what each client sees on their browser. So Python files have the .py extension, and this is a relatively simple one that uses Flask to manage this. What I have here is a list that I'm defining that will store the messages in memory as they come in, right? That's my chat log. And then I have these functions that will control what people see when they make different kinds of requests. So the first function here is the homepage, which we typically call index. So when they open the application, they will see chat HTML, right? So it's up to Python essentially to send back HTML, and it might populate the HTML dynamically with some data. So in this case, we're going to populate the HTML with the chat log, so the list of messages. And to do that, we use what's known as templates. So you'll see here that what I have is a kind of placeholder for the messages. So the messages coming from Python will go into here. Okay, that will populate the page when it's first loaded. The interesting part here is this second function, which uses a new tool that you learn about in the backend module. So it's a bit more advanced than regular kind of old school backend development, where we open so-called web sockets as a way to communicate almost immediately between the front end and the backend. We're going to teach you about a tool called Socket.io that helps you create those channels and pass messages across them. And what this does, this function, is that it will handle the submission of a message from the front end. When a message comes in, it will add it, append it to the chat log here, and it will then emit it, essentially broadcast it to all of the users, right? Such that every user connected to the front end, which is connected to the backend, will see the message appear for them. So this is the core of it. And we'll need to make a small change in our JavaScript. And now this is a bit bigger project. We have more kind of subfolders here. So we move our JavaScript here, and we need to essentially add Socket.io to work from here. Again, I'm not going to go into the details, but you'll see that it's the same idea. This is the main change, that we add an event handler for a Socket.io message. So when a chat event message comes in from the server, we will run the same function that we defined before, add message, to actually add it to the page. And the rest of it is the same. So we can, with JavaScript, kind of evolve our projects gradually, keeping the same functionality for controlling the page and adding whatever pieces we need to create something bigger. Okay, the rest of it is pretty much the same. I need to run this now. So unlike what we did with HTML, to run Python code, we need to use the command line, and you learn to do this on the course as well. I have a command here that will run a application called gunicorn that will launch our server in a production mode. And this is actually what you would do when it comes time to deploy your application to others. And this is what it looks like. Okay, and again, I'm going to show you what happens when we have two of these. Okay, so I'm going to open the same thing twice. Okay, pull one of them to the left. And I'm going to start typing. Okay, so I'm Yoni. Hi. Okay, and you'll see now that this immediately synchronized across both of them. So if Nicole is here, right, she types a message, this one sees it and can respond. So this is what the backend does, right? With the backend, you control how information flows, coordinate it, make decisions. Later on, you'll see how to actually, right, use frameworks such as Django to actually have people register and control permissions. So here, there's no permission management, right? This is very simple. And because this is halfway up, right, this is kind of a very simple backend application. This is what you learn to do here. But as you keep going through the course, right, you'll learn how to add all of those additional user management features. And you'll then learn how to add a database, right? So in this case, there's no database. There's just that very simple list of messages. But if you wanted to, right, you could use a database to structure this in a way that rather than only having individual messages, we might have dedicated rooms for different conversation topics. We might have user stored in a way that each user has their profile, might have preferences. We might have different roles. So for example, you might set it up such that some users have moderation permissions on specific pages, and essentially keep going, kind of create a whole social network like Reddit with something like this. So that's the idea. And if you want to play with this, what I have here for you is a deployed version of this. So the previous one was running on my computer, but sorry, what I have here is a version that I deployed to the cloud. And if you want to play with this yourselves to get a feel for how it works, I've put it in the chat as well. So that's it. That was my demo. I hope this gave you a bit of an appetite for what you learn here. And I'll now pass this on to Graham. Thank you.
Hi everyone. So if you are looking to join us on this course, we do have payment plans available for them. It is booking in with €1,000 deposit and then 9 equal installments that are paid monthly. The first installment isn't paid until 30 days after the course start date. And the next intake that we have is May 27th. So book a consultation call with us now to discuss the best pricing options and availability on the courses. If you do have any questions, pop them down into the Q&A box below and we'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Graham, and thank you, Yoni. That was brilliant. I'm actually also just going to pop in that link there just in case you want to schedule a call. So I'm going to pop that into the chat there now. 2 seconds. Sent to everyone. So if you're interested in scheduling a call with Graham or one of our education consultants, you can click on that link, put in your details, and we'll schedule a call with you guys as well. It'd be great. You'll be able to chat one-on-one with one of our advisors to ask any questions that you have or just get to know the course a little bit more. So if anyone has any questions, please do pop them in the Q&A box there below. We have another QR code on screen there now. That's to download the course brochure. When you download the brochure, you'll just get to see a more in-depth version of all the modules and what's entailed in the course and the assessment process and everything. So please do that as well. So I think we've one question there so far, so I'll pop to that. But please do pop in your questions. So Yoni, I say this is a question for you. Are there any elements of object-oriented programming in the course? Hopefully I said that properly now.
Oh, no, thank you. Yeah, so I'm happy to say that there are. So object-oriented programming, for people who aren't familiar with that, is an approach, a methodology for writing code. And in this program, you learn how to use object-oriented programming, both in the JavaScript module and in the Python module. So both allow for that. but both languages allow you to essentially choose your approach. So you'll see the ability to use object-oriented programming to create classes of objects to implement your functionality, and alternative ways of doing this with pure functions. So
Great stuff. Another question there. So if someone is looking to start a career in software development, would this be a good place to start? Maybe between yourself and Graham might be the best one there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as Yoni pointed out, this kind of takes you right the way through full stack, setting you up with relevant portfolio work that you're able to showcase. There is also support at the end with work placement to get you to put those skills into real world action.
Yeah, no, I would absolutely agree. So this will give you a very good foundation, of course, for going to full stack development or each part of web development, but also because you'll be learning the concepts of programming and you'll be learning Python, which is an extremely in-demand language. You'll also be able to start a more general career in software development, working on data analytics, AI, and anything else you might use.
Great stuff. We've no more questions there at the moment, so I'll just give it 1 or 2 more seconds just in case there's any last minute questions. But please do, if you want to talk directly to Graham or another education consultant, you can click on that link there to schedule a call, and you'll be able to ask any questions that you might have as well, if you prefer that. But I think maybe everyone is excited to get out in the sun, possibly, perhaps, or we've already answered all the questions throughout the webinar. So we might leave it there. What I'm going to do after is I'm going to send you the recording of this so you can look back on it afterwards. And again, if you have any questions, please do reach out to us as well. We'd love to see you on the course. But just before we go, just a big thank you for Yoni for his time today to go through the course and for going through that example, and for Graham as well also. So I think we'll leave it there, guys. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Bye bye.
Mm.